All right, perfect. So this is the W3C Code of Conduct we're all familiar with. We're all passionate about improving WebRTC, but let's keep it cordial and professional. Next slide. Please get on the queue using the Google Meet tools by raising your hand. Next slide. This is a normal slide about document status you're all familiar with, I hope. We'll get into document status a little bit today. Next slide. But first order of business is to thank Harald Alvestrand. He's retiring. So we wish to celebrate a founding figure of WebRTC on his retirement. He's the former chair. You all know him as a former and founding chair of this working group. He's also been a core contributor from the start, of the author and of the RTC overview draft, RTC web overview draft that later became RFC 8825. He helped launch the standardization effort itself, shaping the original working group charter and much of the spec. And in 2011, he announced Google's release of the WebRTC source code, a turning point for real-time communication on the open web. And he also has decades of standards leadership, including as IETF chair. And Harald, do you want to say something?
Let's speak up a little bit. So it's been a while, but June 30th is the last day I'll be working for Google. And WebRTC has been my main mission since 2010, when I first presented the idea at the IETF Maastricht. And working in this in many aspects, actually writing about it, leading groups about it, and especially discussing about it. Was the chair for 13 years, from inception of this group until Guido was good enough to take over for me. That was a relief in so many ways. Not quite my life's work, but a significant chunk. But I'm laying down my keyboard as a full-time contributor. Don't promise to be around, don't promise to stay away, but we'll see. Other things in life are more important. Not been easy. There are lots of disagreements and lots of fights, but we got to agreements a lot of the time. And I think that what we did was actually making the world a better place. And I leave you all to take care of it, to take it to the next level, wherever that is. I think you have the power and the skill and the will. Go on making the world a better place. So, thanks for all the fish.
Thank you, Harald. Thank you for your vision, your rigor, your generosity over all these years. And I think WebRTC exists in no small part because of you. So enjoy your retirement. You've definitely earned it. All right, with that, onto the agenda. So these are the issues for discussion today. We have, we're going to cover rechartering and remaining work in the working group, and then some issues around the MDNS. And then we have 2 grab bags, one for WebRTC PC and one for WebRTC extensions. So with that, let's jump in. So rechartering. So the WebRTC working group is chartered until 30th of September of this year. So we need to recharter to finish the remaining work, and we don't plan to change scope necessarily. But we need to, we don't want to expand our scope when we have a lot of work left to do. So that said, we will still, welcome agenda items if people have energy in certain areas that they want to cover. But we thought it was good to go over our list of publications and some of the chair's preliminary plans for the remaining work. So we have the link here that lists our publications. We have 1 recommendation, which is WebRTC PC. We have 5 candidate recommendations, 12 working drafts, 1 draft note, and 1 discontinued draft. We also have 2 editors draft that are the extensions drafts for WebRTC PC and media capture main. Next slide. So let's dive into the remaining work. So we're going to cover, well, rec is rec, but we're going to cover the remaining items here. We have 5 candidate recommendations currently, and we're going to go over the following slides using this legend of spec name with current status, our proposed short-term action with some describing comments and qualifiers, and the final target. And so this is open for discussion, so we can just take questions along the way, and I'll just narrate the list here. We have the WebRTC Priority Control API and CR Snapshot. We're thinking of moving that to WebRTC PC and WebRTC extensions based on the parts. Some parts have, well, the ultimate goal is WebRTC PC, but the individual APIs, we might depend on the number of implementations, whether they go into the PC version or the extensions version. Identity for WebRTC is in CR Snapshot. The plan here is to retire once we have S-frame in WebRTC PC, in WebRTC extensions, at which point this would be discontinued. We have the audio output devices API for speakers. Tim?
Yeah, just on the identity piece, is there anything else that we lose in that? Because there was originally there was quite a lot of stuff attached to it. Is there anything that we're gonna lose by doing that? I'm thinking particularly about the certificate handling and maybe some other. There was the thing where you couldn't copy video streams. Were those defined in that, or are they defined elsewhere? I've lost track.
I don't think there's any plan to move. So the identity spec had some unique features, in that it relied on the browsers. Some browsers have these cross-origin protections for video, and at least for video and maybe audio, where an identity was leaning on that by allowing users of a browser to register an identity provider and basically treat content as opaque so that the JavaScript could not access it, similar to how JavaScript cannot access cross-origin video and audio. So there's no plan to move that forward that I am aware of. There was only one implementation, which is in Firefox. And I think, so the goal would be to drop those efforts. Some criticisms of those APIs have been that they don't cover data. So I think the idea is that with S-frame, we have a better approach for securing not just video and audio, but also data. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll reread the thing we're proposing to discontinue and see if we're losing anything that I care about. But yeah, it answers the question.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, please file issues and any questions and concerns you have. This is basically just the chair's overall plan. So, we're happy to take input on individual items. All right, so audio output devices, CR draft. The plan there is to do a short triage and publish a CR snapshot, with the final target being CR, meaning that we don't believe we have the energy to push this one to rec necessarily. This is what you'll see starting to emerge here, is that we have some plans for which specs we want to push to rec and which ones we want to get to a solid place. And with the thinking that not every spec needs to go to candidate. Not every spec needs to go to recommendation necessarily, because that's a lot of work. So media capture and streams, CR draft. The goal there is to triage and publish a CR snapshot pretty soon, because right now it's in the CR draft, which is the less stable state for CR, with a long-term plan of reaching rec in 2027. And then we have the WebRTC stats spec, which also is in CR draft. The plan there is to just publish another snapshot and with a final goal of CR. Next slide. And then we also have 12 working drafts on 2 slides. So using the same legend, we have WebRTC encoded transform, which we plan to do a short triage and publish a CR snapshot of with the plan, long-term plan of getting to recommendation in 2028. We have media stream track insertable media processing using streams, where we plan to publish the CR snapshot for a final goal of CR. Media capture recording, publish CR snapshot with goal of CR. Media stream track content hints. The plan here is to move the content hints contains 2 parts, the content hints and also some degradation preference. So the plan the plan is to move the content hints and their effect on things like constraints to the media capture main spec and media capture recorder, and to move the degradation preference parts to WebRTC PC, as those have a pretty good implementation. And in that case, I should have added an arrow here. That means content hint would be discontinued once that has happened. For screen capture, the plan is to triage and publish the CR snapshot with final goal of CR. For media stream image capture, the plan is currently a working draft, and the plan is to leave it as a working draft. Next slide. And the final 6 here is capture handle, bootstrapping collaboration when screen sharing, leave as is as a working draft. Media capture from DOM elements is fairly mature in implementation, but has some rough edges. The idea here is to publish the CR snapshot with a final goal of CR. A viewport capture, leave as is a working draft. Scalable video coding, SVC, extensions for WebRTC. The plan there is to move to WebRTC PC, leaving this spec discontinued. And I think if that alternatively, it could go to WebRTC extensions, but I think Firefox is working to implement this, so that would satisfy the implementation requirement. For read and capture, the plan is to leave as is a working draft. And media stream capture scenarios, the plan is to retire. Final goal, discontinued state. The next slide. Then we have a draft note and 2 editor's drafts. So we have WebRTC extended use cases. The plan is to discontinue that. For WebRTC extensions, which is our editor's draft, that we split WebRTC into in order to get it to rec. The plan is to move things that can be moved to WebRTC PC and to leave and publish the rest as a working draft. And same thing for media capture extensions. Move what can be moved to media capture main and publish the rest as is. And the last one is media capture depth streams extensions, which is already discontinued. Next slide. So that is the final target would be that we would end up having, if all this works out, which is, check in 2 years, we'd hopefully have 3 recommendations, WebRTC encoded transform, media capture main. We would have 6 candidate recommendations. Basically, that number didn't change that much because we lost some and we gained some other ones from merging specs around. 6 working drafts and 4 discontinued drafts. So this is the chair's proposed plan. So now discuss, I guess, questions, comments, concerns. Johan?
Yeah, so overall it seems okay to me. I would like to mention that it's still an important effort for editors, and we have fewer and fewer editors. So there's also this issue, which is how we increase the editors' energy and time. That's something to consider. And also, I was wondering whether Pepsi, we didn't talk really about Pepsi, right? So maybe it's already covered elsewhere and we don't have to mention it, or maybe we should mention it in somehow as well in the charter. I don't know whether it's worth it, but yeah.
Oh, in the charter, do you think we need to change our scope for that one? It does cover. It's a unique solution to
Yeah.
permissions, but it should be covered.
Yeah. It's probably covered. Yeah, I don't know
Mm.
whether we want to make it explicit or not. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I think that the work is happening in media capture extensions. So I think the goal would be to try to move it to media capture main. And I think our would we do that before rec? We could try. But yes, the devil is in the details for some of these things. So yes, I think our goal was to outline a vision, an initial plan, and hopefully basically as sort of a guide for where we would direct our energy unless informed otherwise by members. So
yeah, I tend to agree. I would say Pepsi is one thing that we might put energy. So maybe it's worth
yes, for sure.
being more explicit. I don't know. It's yeah, it should be discussed.
Son?
Yeah, I just have a question about discontinued, especially about WebRTC extension. Could you explain what does discontinue means for these specs or discussions?
Oh, sure. If you go back one slide, I believe we already have, if you go look at the bottom one, media capture depth stream extensions, that's already been discontinued. That's basically when the document is still available, but it has as far as standards tracked, it has been discontinued to try to, it means we're no longer working on it, basically. But it's still available,
Okay.
but no longer being worked on. So
Okay,
every
thanks.
document, sure. Every document has a standards track, with the exception of WebRTC extensions and media capture extensions, which are editor's drafts, where the goal for APIs in those two particular specs is to eventually be moved into media capture main or WebRTC PC. And the criteria we've used there is one implementation plus one implementer interest in order to move things. So those two specs are kind of a holding pen that we want to get rid of eventually by moving them into the target spec. And for things we cannot move, we would probably publish as a working draft, not discontinue, if that makes sense. So the ones being discontinued are WebRTC extended use cases, and I forget the two other ones. Media stream capture scenarios, and one more somewhere. Identity, yes. So WebRTC extensions and media capture extensions would be published as working drafts if there's anything left in them that wasn't moved. Harald?
So the obvious leftover from that doesn't have a CR, a rec path out, but is widely used is stats. That says leave as CR. I wonder about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Stats is sort of an interesting case because it has a subset of the stats spec is required as mandatory to implement in WebRTC PC. And the subset, the long tail of that, I guess, is not mandatory to implement. But I think, isn't it already a CR?
I think it's been at CR for a while.
Right. So I think in order to get the recommendation, we'd need 2 implementations of every stat, I think. And that might be a tall order.
Yeah, so is it still a viable approach to designate this as living standard?
The stat spec?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to leave things in CR that the internet depends on when it's CR forever. It's like
Well,
implementing
groups are, yeah. Some
Sorry,
groups are
sorry.
doing that. Yeah. So
Right.
it's one way of doing things. It's
Yes,
the cheap way
so
of
that-
living. So
Yeah, good point. That's a cheap way of having a living standard, is to stay in CR basically forever. So we have WEBRTC PC, where we actually have recommendation, and we're still sort of editing it and updating it, but there's a lot of effort with that model, perhaps. So I think, I'm not sure that the W3C has figured out the best way to maintain live standards, and there are at least 2 options we seem to have here. I would say for stats, we have the additional option of extending the list of mandatory to implement stats in WEBRTC PC, which would effectively give us a way to nail down additional stats as we choose.
Well, that's a downref.
Yes.
And downrefs are.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. So I think the best solution is to keep it in CR forever, because that gives us flexibility. But getting it to rec, I mean, if we can get it to rec, I don't think we would oppose going to rec, but it would require an implementer effort.
And it would probably require some kind of holding pen at the CR for the stuff that can't make it to rec, because it's there's enough stuff that is operationally important.
All right. Okay. Any other comments? Otherwise, I think we're 8 minutes past. Erin?
Yeah, just to mention briefly the difference between living standard CR and REC is that the living standard CR has not necessarily been tested against 2 implementations, while the recommendation has passed the criteria for interop.
Great, thank you. That makes sense. Are you on?
Just one additional point that TPAC is coming as well. I know it's not really related to rechartering, but I'm wondering whether as a group we want to meet at TPAC. If so, we need to answer by tomorrow. So what do people think?
I think that makes sense.
We should be recharted by then, so I think we can reserve room and go on.
Okay, sounds good. So I guess the chairs have an action to do it by tomorrow, like register for rooms by tomorrow.
Okay. Ewan, can I volunteer you to do that?
Yeah, sure. Plan might be to allocate time for European afternoon sessions so that it's sort of still friendly for US people.
Perfect, thank you. All right, next is MDNS and local network access. Ewan?
Right, so Yanivar, you filed an issue some time ago about Firefox being prompted on macOS related to MDNS, and basically the prompt was related to local network access. So I started to look at it, and I noticed 2 things. So first, there's the macOS prompt. I will talk about it, but there's also the YCG local network access stack, which is highly related to that. So it's it's not already new spec because it's already implemented in Chrome and Firefox, I think, but it's still evolving. So it's a new permission-based API that is gating public web pages from accessing local sites. The typical use case is you have a public page and it's trying to reach the user's home router. So it may be for good reasons. Maybe the home router is, the web page is owned by the manufacturer of the home router and it's doing config. Or maybe it's a hacker. And so what this API is, what this spec is defining is what is the local network, and then a permission, so a prompt. So you can see two examples of prompts, one from Chrome on the left and Firefox on the right, I believe. And it's something like allow this website to access apps and services on devices connecting to your local network, or it's this website wants to look for and connect to any device on your local network. It's focusing on HTTP, WebSocket, Web Transfer for now, at least implementation-wise. But the scope of the spec, I believe, is so WebRTC is also in scope, I believe, if not implementation-wise. So when I looked at the spec has no notion of WebRTC, so there's some effort that should be done there. And I'm guessing that it's some effort that could be a joint effort between these YCG folks and some WebRTC folks as well. So it's working fine.
So there is an implementation in Chrome for WebRTC actually. I think it's behind. I think it's still behind the flag.
Okay, so that's good. So maybe there's an action for the implementers there to update the spec somehow or provide a PR. That would be nice. And then maybe the WebRTC working group could review and provide feedback. Or it could be discussed here, maybe. Next slide. So yeah, so this spec is defining two new permissions. One is called local network, and it's really the router use case. So it's local network access. And the other one is loopback networks. So it's gating access to requests to loopback addresses. And it's sort of related to the localmess.io thing, I guess. Yeah, Tim?
So I'm a bit worried about the definition of local networks for IPv6. I mean, maybe it's not in scope in this discussion now, but my public IP address and my local IP address for IPv6 may or may not be the same.
Yeah.
So that needs to be discussed maybe in more depth at some other point. I don't know. Yeah.
Haven't precisely looked at that point. I know there are some IPv6 non-persistent addresses that can be used, and maybe so maybe probably the spec is saying something about it, but I haven't looked. Yeah. So since there are two new permissions, there's integration with the permission API. So the web page can query whether local network or loopback network is access is granted, denied, or whether it's unknown and user should be prompt. And there's also a permissions policy, which allows delegation from iframe, and it's also allowing the website itself to, for instance, disable local network access. So no prompt, it's always denied, for instance. Next slide. So getting back to Yonivar issue, so in macOS, there's now an OS level gate for accessing local network. And it's actually gating WebRTC today. My understanding of the goal is that some applications were actually trying to get as much information of the user, including the user's local network. So for instance, getting all MDNS services, and that can be used to fingerprint user or to better know the user, and you can you basically steal information from the user. And these applications were not using that MDNS information to connect or do whatever. So having the user the ability to decide whether an application should get access to this information is quite useful. The scope is local network, not loopback, and there's an example of a prompt. It's something like allow this application to find devices on local networks. So since it's OS based, it's application wide. It's not per origin. Within WebRTC, this particular prompt can happen at 2 times. The first, so it's basically happening when set remote description or add ICE candidate is called. Say you have an MDNS ICE candidate in either the SDP or you're adding it, then the user agent will try to do MDNS resolution. This will create a simulcast message, and simulcast message will trigger the prompt. But even if you do not have MDNS candidates, if you still have like local network IP addresses in your candidates, say for instance, there are like 2 user agents, one has the access of its own private IP addresses and it's sending it to the other peer, then the other peer will try to connect to local network access, and this will also trigger the prompt. So in one case, it's happening when there's actually a connection try, which is probably good. And in the other case, it's happening very quickly whenever there's an MDNS candidate. Next slide. So yeah, with MDNS candidates, the prompt is happening quite aggressively on MDNS candidate addition. And it would be the same for local networks as access spec, I guess, or it's there's no spec yet, but I would guess that's what would happen if we were to do it now. So is there a path forward for MDNS ICE candidates? Because MDNS ICE candidates were designed to protect the user, and now we are seeing that there's a prompt very quickly. So 2 things related to MDNS ICE candidates. First, they're UUID version 4 based. So they're basically non-persistent generate per session, and they're randomly generated, so they do not carry a lot of information. So based on that, there might be a possibility to only prompt if there's a chance to connect, and not prompt as soon as you try to resolve the MDNS UUID name. In case of successful resolution, normally you try to connect. And then if you're trying to connect, the prompt would happen. But if the resolution fails, which would be the case a lot of the time, there would be no prompt. So that would reduce prompt fatigue, and that could be a solution forward. It's something, so it's a question mark because it's not, we need to investigate it. So having feedback from you on this would be interesting. Whether that's working, whether it's opening holes as well, that's something we need to study. Next slide. So getting back to loopback. So as you can see, local network access is prompting in case of loopback. And one reason is that it's blocking abuses like we've seen with localhost.io, which basically was doing cross-app tracking via localhost using, I believe, stun messages, or yeah, the WebRTC at least. And so it's interesting there to see whether MDNS resolution would be okay for loopbacks. There's a known issue that was filed by Martin Thompson. So I haven't seen a lot of activity recently, but it's worth restarting the effort. It seems that it might be OS dependent somehow, depending on whether the OS is allowing every app to know about these MDNS names. It might be an issue. But if only the OS knows about the these names, then maybe it's fine. And one possibility, for instance, would be to only expose these names to people trying to query them and not trying to enumerate them by default to every app that wants them. Also, loopback is also important for testing. For instance, it's quite heavily used for testing. And so having a prompt for local loop within the user agent is something that might not be desirable. I believe user agents can decide for their own registered MDNS names. They know their registers these MDNS names. They know their registers open sockets. So maybe they could decide whether to prompt for these names and sockets that they know of. And of course, they would be for legitimate WebRTC cases like loopback in the same page. They should not prompt basically. And if there are some abuse cases, then maybe we should describe them, and then there should be a prompt. Next slide. Yeah. So finally, I believe there was an issue that was filed a long time ago about adding a prompt that would allow to get access to mode 2 from WebRTC IP address handling, meaning getting access to the default private IP. Today, a web page can get access to this IP address, but GUM or get display media must be called beforehand. So the issue was about adding a prompt, and I think it was closed because there was no real activity, and this would require another spec. So now we have sort of a spec. So maybe this prompt from local network access could allow to migrate to mode 2. That's something we could discuss. I don't think that mode 1, which is allowed to enumerate all interfaces, is actually like the prompt. Well, we could just discuss also upgrading to mode 1, but it seems more difficult to me. So feedback there would be interesting. I was wondering whether also we want an explicit API to trigger the prompt. So currently, to trigger the prompt, you need to either connect, so you need to do things, and maybe the website would want to connect or would want to show the prompt beforehand. So that's something that is difficult because usually network access is done asynchronously. It can be done in the background. There's no user gesture. So it's a bit more difficult than a prompt for camera access, where usually you expect a user gesture. Also, is there a need for an API to suppress the prompt for WebRTC? If a web page really does not want to have a prompt there, there's the permissions policy API with a HTTP header, for instance. Do we need an API to disable WebRTC MDNS support or local network access to WebRTC? That's something we could also discuss. I see Yonivar in the queue.
Yes, so two comments. The first is looking at RFC 8828. I believe Get User Media gates mode 1. So it seems to me that we
Chrome,
should be able to. Okay.
In Chrome, yes. In Safari, no. I don't know about Firefox.
Okay. I believe it's mode 1. So, but it sounds to me that whatever Get User Media was always like a bit of a hack. I feel is that ideally device capture should have nothing to do with networking. So I would definitely support any move toward an actual local network permission prompt here. The second part about suppressing the API, I think we have to be a little careful. I don't think I think the where to start. So WebRTC, I think I would say that I'm not going to give I'm hesitant to give a number, but I would guess like 90% of WebRTC calls today are not local network calls. Mm-hmm. At the same time, and I think the use case, I think we need to support the use case where this does not trigger a local network access prompt, because that is the dominant WebRTC use case. For users that do want, but it's also important to not worsen the experience when WebRTC is peer-to-peer. So if it's possible form a connection locally, we should still support that. So it would be also negative, I think, if that became a second-class citizen.
My hope is that currently, if we can reduce the number of prompts that could happen with MDNS candidates, for instance, to the case where there's a connection that is feasible and we are trying to do it, then maybe the number of prompts will be reduced a lot. And for like Google Meet, for instance, there will never be a successful case. So hopefully it will prompt will never happen, and we do not need an API to suppress network access for WebRTC. I would hope that otherwise maybe there should be like a global network API and not WebRTC specific. But I mean, it's also interesting to hear about thoughts.
Yeah, just adding that I don't think set remote description or add candidate is the correct trigger to trigger a prompt. So if we can avoid those somehow.
I don't know.
They don't really signify user intent to access the local network, in my view.
I know, but it's the same for fetch, for instance. Fetch is usually called without a user gesture. It's done in the background, and
but the options there are the options there are to prompt or try to do without local candidates in the case, because there will be cases where the browser doesn't have local network access, and in that case it could just do a worse job. But if the user agent has permission but the website does not, it could try to do better than that. Right?
How?
Well, it could try to. It could use the browser could use MDNS in that case, but it could not necessarily require that for the website.
Oh, okay. So you're trying to think of limiting.
Well, I'll have to think about it.
Yeah, there's definitely an issue about which is macOS specific, which is when do you trigger the OS level prompt compared to the browser LNA prompt, and there's something to be discussed there definitely, because probably like for camera, it's interesting. For camera, usually there's the browser prompt first, and then the OS prompt, which is just one time, and so hopefully we could have a similar approach there, where it's the browser that prompts first, and then the OS. But yeah, still something to think of.
Thanks.
People?
If we want to disable WebRTC's MDNS support, we can probably use the no-host ice gathering policy. That would allow applications to opt into that. Like Google Meet could set that, and it would never gather a local candidate.
So what is the no-host policy? Where do you
it is something that is implemented in WebRTC. It has been specified in ORTC, but it never made it to WebRTC PC.
Ah, that's interesting.
So it just needs to be web exposed.
I see.
The problem is the definition of local network address is difficult, and we need to synchronize with the LNA specification.
Yeah, I haven't precisely looked at how the spec is defining local loop and private next and local network, but yeah, the idea would probably to piggyback on their definition. Hopefully, it should be a good one.
Yes, it's I think a table with 10 rows at least.
Tim?
Yeah,
I think it's great that we're finally getting around to doing this properly in a way that doesn't trigger it off get user media. I mean, there are specific use cases for one-way video which would really benefit from having a proper prompt here, which I think would be good. The only piece that slightly worries me is that we're still talking about using a generic and quite scary wording. It would be nice if it was possible if the prompt was kind of, if you knew that the prompt was triggered by WebRTC, that you could give some hint that it was a video call that was happening, that was supposed to be happening to, or, you know, what the purpose of this this network, what looks like a network attack. It would be nice to outline what the purpose of it is purported to be, and then the user could see if that tied in with what they were expecting. So if it says, like, you know, your browser is trying to set up a video call and they're trying to access their baby monitor, then that makes sense. If they're trying to access their toaster, it probably doesn't. And so I think that having some sense of being able to tie what it is that's going to happen with what you think you've done means that the language has to be less generic. But that may be very difficult to achieve because getting language right is hard. And then the final thing I want to say is I'm happy to kind of work with people on this. So we've got very specific interests and use cases in this area. So, you know, happy to coordinate and comment and whatever could be useful in this space.
Yeah. With regard to the prompt wording, it's user agent territory. I would say that if you're using WebRTC, you don't know whether it will be video call or data channel. Ditto for web transport. Are you using it for text, for video? It's difficult. The thing that is difficult as well is that, as I said before, usually networking happens asynchronously. So what we would like would be to, we would like to be in a situation where the web page can provide information. Hey, I'm trying to connect to a baby monitor. Click on it. Then there's a prompt saying, hey, do you want to connect to local devices? Oh, yeah, the web page told me that. Yeah, that makes sense. I have a baby monitor, probably I grant access. But given all these things are asynchronous, it remains to be seen. I guess like that websites that really want to handle correctly the baby monitor thing will be able to have this experience, but the default user experience, I'm not sure will be great. It might be hard to show a prompt, like even asynchronously, the web page can be in the background and you're trying to show a prompt and the user will never see it, for instance. So that's why it's much more difficult, I think, than get user media, for instance. But still, it's already deployed, so piggybacking on it seems good to me. Peter, you're next.
I didn't follow everything going on in the discussion, so I apologize if this is a redundant question. But when you say mode 2 with default private IP, are you proposing that would happen if LNA happened? Is that what the question mark is about?
Yeah, if you have an LNA, if you're permitted to access to local network, either through a prompt or because the user granted persistent permission, the idea would be that by default, you would leak the default private IP address. Like getting to mode 2. Mode 1, I don't know, because mode 1 is not, can be more than local networks. So,
okay, so in that case,
to discuss.
I would be in favor of that proposal. I think it'd be great if we could get the default private IP in this case where LNA happens to come up. I guess my follow-up question would then be, can the developer know that when LNA is going to pop up?
Yeah, there's a there's a permissions query which allows you to know whether the permission state is granted or denied or prompt.
Okay, and the developer can prompt it whenever it wants.
That's the issue. There's no, I don't think there's an explicit API to trigger a prompt, but maybe JavaScript could try to trigger the prompt by fetching some resources and so on, which is a kind of a hack. But I guess it's generate to LNA. So maybe it's a question to LNA, and maybe they have already a solution to that, and WebRTC could just piggyback on that. But it seems to me that, yeah,
That would
Go
be
ahead.
really nice for use cases that would benefit from the default private AP. So something like WebTorrent, they could show something to the user like, hey, we're going to pop something up to you because we need this to work properly. So click this button and then you'll get a prompt.
So you would be in favor of an explicit API to trigger a prompt, basically. That's my understanding.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's something we could try to mention to the LNA force. So maybe one action is for WebRTC working group to contact this force and say, hey, we're interested in improving LNA, describing how it's working with WebRTC and so on, and start from there. It's YCG, so I'm guessing that it would be better if it was WFC or WGG, but yeah. Yeah, Yanivar?
Yeah, just one caution there, I think, is that normally, at least Mozilla, we tend to prefer permission at point of use, which would, I think, argue against. But also in this case, this seems something JavaScript could already accomplish using some clever WebRTC calls, perhaps.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Yeah, I tend to agree with this, with the point. Normally, you want to prompt at connection time, but it's...
as long as it's reliably known when it will happen and it's not too hacky. Like, I don't want something that works on one browser but doesn't work on another, or changes between versions of browsers and then suddenly breaks.
Yep. Okay, so maybe we are out of time anyway, but I guess next slide. Yeah. So it seems that we should try to contact the LNA folks, basically, and also maybe Harald or Guido, since there's already a WebRTC implementation of LNA, maybe it's worth describing how it's working somewhere, either a PR or in GitHub.
I can try to. I can have an action item to try to find out how that integration is working.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so we're 8 minutes behind, but hopefully I'll try to go through this a bit quickly. This is a grab bag of issues that came up with interop, and here's a wall of text, basically. There's about 8 issues I'm going to cover, and they were mostly found because they were interop 2026 adjacent, I would say. Not every issue is interop 2026 related, but it came up in Firefox's. I think these are mostly from Firefox trying to implement their side of interop. Next slide. The first thing we found is that the WebRTC protocol crypto suite test allows an invalid value in RTC transport stats SRTP cipher. The spec says it's supposed to be values from the AONA DTLS SRTP protection profile registry. But we found that the test is also accepting AES CM128 HMAC SHA-180, which is not in the registry. And I believe FIPO has an answer for this. Go ahead.
Yes, libWebRTC was using the wrong values. It's already fixed in libWebRTC, so I propose we just go for A and remove the wrong value from the test.
That sounds good to me. If there's no objection, we can move
slide.
on. Yes, thank you. Next slide, please. Unless there was any objection, shouldn't go too fast. But all right, I'll move on describing. Feel free to raise your hand to ask about the previous slide if you need to. The next step here is for it says steps for RTLS DTLS transport state update are vague when handling RFC 8842, which is about DTLS association. Excuse me. So basically, RFC 8829 says that if the A equals TLS ID line changes, the value must, if the value changes, basically, then you have a situation where a new DTLS association is being established. We believe this cannot happen in browsers currently, but other non-browser endpoints can try to restart a DTLS association. And this note here says that when that happens, each endpoint needs to be prepared to receive data both on the new and old DTLS associations, as long as both are live. Excuse me. And there's a note in WebRTC PC that says a new DTLS association for an existing transceiver will be represented by an existing object whose state will be updated accordingly, as opposed to being represented by a new object. So the question on the implemented question here, when does this DTLS remote certificate, when does this DTLS object, which includes internal slots for remote certificate update, happen? As soon as the new association is established, or when the old association stops being used? So that's the first question here. We think it makes sense to do it as soon as the association is established, so we're proposing that. And to also add some bailout steps to the algorithm so that object equality can be, so basically so we're not changing and creating new objects unnecessarily. I saw a thumbs up. Any other comments or objections to this? I'm not hearing any objections, so hopefully this will be a quick shopping expedition. Next slide. 3112, we see that pc.sctp, which is the data channel object for transports, is updated in have remote offer. But when that happens, well, it's also updated in have a local offer, but we're talking specifically in have remote offer. Nothing sets up the transport member of the SCTP object, which is not nullable. Also, there's the spec uses an algorithm here that creates a new, when the algorithm calls creating an SCTP transport object, nothing in that algorithm sets up the DTLS transport member. There's no internal slot. So this is some of the transport related parts of the spec don't really have internal slots. So it's a weakness in the spec. And this seems to be one of them. Basically, the core issue here is that the spec doesn't really create DTLS transports until either set local description offer or SRD answer. Actually, that probably should have been set local description or SRD answer. In any case, next slide. That means that the DTLS object is also not available until then, which means that the SCTP object is available sooner than the underlying transport, which might be fine. But we also see some signs in Chrome and Safari. They will actually set the SCTP transport object in have remote offer. Sorry, that should be, yeah, remote offer. But if we look at the details of the object that sets and its underlying ICE transport, we see that the role is null and the component is undefined. And there's a fiddle there for those who want to try it out. So we need to fix some things here. We could make the transport.ice transport nullable, but that would be unusual. And also it would be kind of odd to have a DTLS transport without any underlying ICE, which is why you need to create it. So the proposal here is basically A, make SCTP transport nullable. That would match sender.transport and receiver.transport. Or something else like move it in the time of initialization. So we're proposing A. Pippo?
I looked into this in WEBRTC and it's easy to change. So I would say we go for A.
All right, that sounds great. Not hearing any objections, so, oh, one more. Tim?
So is there any interaction with Snap here, Pippo? Like, would this prevent us from having an SCTP association created before DTLS is up? Which is effectively what we're doing with Snap.
No, I think the SCTP transport would exist after set local description in those cases. So Snap should be covered.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim. Can you clarify what Snap is for the uninitiated?
It's an RFC of FIPPOs that's supposedly takes some packets out of the startup by moving things around, blurring the layer distinctions between the protocols to make it faster startup. But it might mean that that you've got an SCTP transport in place before DTLS had finished initializing.
Okay, but it's solved. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, proposal A it is. Next slide. Okay, this was filed by FIPO. Basically, we have packets sent and packets received are missing from the mandatory to implement transport and candidate pair stats. This seems surprising given that the bookkeeping needs seem to be the same. So I think the proposal here would be, since we're already implementing, and we can see basically, so basically I should clarify, for the RTP transport, everyone implements packets sent and bytes sent and packets received and bytes received. But that similarity seems to end for the transport object and the candidate pair object, so that it will be consistent to add that similarity there as well. We see Firefox and Safari are missing all the transport ones. And for the candidate pair ones, it seems like Firefox is passing bytes received and bytes sent. Pippa?
Transport should be fixed in Firefox today in Web Platform tasks, and for candidate pair, I have a Firefox patch to implement them. Just waiting for
Excellent. Perfect. That's good to hear. So I think I would be in favor of including this in the mandatory to implement stats. Any objection?
Yeah, I think it's okay doing it, provided there's a Bugzilla bug in WebKit so that we keep track of it. Because otherwise it might stay like this. So having a bug would be great.
Fippo, would you be available to file that bug?
Can do, but I think Safari already implements those. The WEBRTC does, for sure. It's a matter of whether it's properly lined up in the IDL. I'll check.
Yeah, probably the binding layer is not supported in Safari, so probably there's no ideal definition of backend sense, or it's just not populated. Either one of the two.
Okay, and I guess so. That's great to hear. Does this impact NROP at all? Pippo, do you know?
No idea.
Okay. Well, we won't cover that here then. All right, next slide. Thank you. So this is 3115, RTCI's candidate parse comparison of IPv6 addresses could use some clarification regarding normalization. Basically, currently no browser normalizes IPv6 addresses that appear in ICE candidates. But there doesn't appear to be any spec language saying to not normalize. It'd probably be good to write that down. So for instance, an IPv6 address that ends in 0001 comes back as, just 1 if it's normalized. And the same for a zero-padded IPv4 literal would be normalized too. So WebRTC PC and RFC 8839 seem silent on whether the post address should be normalized. So this might be wrong, but untested. So also we should take care of specify the comparison rules for when we do obfuscating and obfuscating of peer reflexive candidates, so that doesn't have corner cases as well. So the question here for the working group is basically, do we specify that these things are verbatim or normalized? Carl?
Is this a case where parsing and generating should be two different rules? We can certainly dictate or try to dictate that all IPv6 addresses should be emitted in normalized form, which would be nice. But you probably need to handle IPv6 addresses no matter how they're encoded.
All right, so I think this one's from Byron trying to implement this, and I think his observations were that no browser currently, all the browsers currently just return the verbatim addresses. So if you like create a new RTC ICE candidate with a candidate string, and then you interrogate the readable properties of it afterwards, you always get the literal values in all the browsers. So I think which would lean toward proposal A. Ewan?
Yeah, if all browsers are already doing it and it does not seem to cause any issue, I would stick with A, describing what browsers are doing, and if we want to change it later, we can always do it.
That sounds good. Tim?
Yeah, I tend to agree that, I mean, it means that you're not changing stuff that's been input gratuitously. I mean, there are an infinite number of formats. I don't think it's useful to move between them unnecessarily. So yeah, no, I'd leave it as it's come in. I don't think there's a need to change it. Yes,
I think I agree. It's definitely the simpler answer at this point, but I also agree that we might want to revisit that if it. There's some coming slides here that makes it a little more tricky, but this is good for now. So proposal A. Thank you. Next slide. So Interop 2026 contains ideal harness tests for half-implemented get remote candidates, get local candidates. So this is something we caught. There's a couple of things here. First, our ability to filter ideal harness tests is limited to interfaces, which meant that our only option as far as tracking in WPT.FYI would be to either include or exclude the DTLS object, basically. Sorry, the ICE transport object. So Byron's observation here is that Chrome is the only browser that implements get local candidates. While Chrome passes the IDL test for get remote candidates, that function appears to always return an empty array. So what we have here are basically some false positives for the get remote candidates, and we have questions about how to implement it. There's currently one test case that checks for non-empty return from get remote candidates, and no browser passes that test case. Also, this goes back to the definitions of these objects, which I think are a little poorly defined in that they basically don't have algorithms to clarify a lot of edge cases. All it says is for get local candidates, it says returns a sequence describing the local ICE candidates gathered for this ICE transport and sent in on ICE candidate, which sounds simple at the surface, but what about things like rollback, ICE restarts, all the generational candidates when you do when you change the UFrag? Are they kept in this array or are they dropped? So basically, it seems in Chrome, based on a fiddle here, that rollback will remove new local candidates, whereas ICE restart will accumulate them. So basically, you get an array of every ICE restart, every generation of candidates for this transport over time. So it'll grow over time if you do ICE restarts. We also observed, and the good news is that plain renegotiation does not create duplicates. But there's also no loss of all candidates over time. So I think the question here is multiple questions, I guess. We're not quite sure how to get it out of Interop 2026. That's a problem. Also, the question is, how do we feel about this implementation of get local candidates? Ewan?
Two things. First, if there's no support for filtering out methods, we should just add it. It's probably not that big a deal to add it, probably simple, so we should just add it and remove it from Interop 2026. So that would be my recommendation, and we can talk with WPT folks to see how to do it. It seems to make sense to... Yeah.
Did you say add it to Interop 2026?
No. I said we should try to add support for filtering out methods that we do not think should be in Interop. if that's the issue with ideas. So we should remove it from ITOR 2026 and update WPT infra with whatever is needed to move it out easily. That's
Well,
that would be
we
my
could try
recommendation.
okay, we could try to ask for that. I have some concerns that we already pushed the envelope quite a bit with meta variables already. So we could try.
Yeah, and but yeah, with regards to the issues, yeah, it makes sense that we dig into that. At some point, we were talking about an ICE monitor API and ICE handling. So I'm guessing that having more algorithms related to local and remote candidates management would be beneficial. Also, should we add an API for like fine-grained monitoring of candidates as well? So I would be in favor into trying to provide algorithms there.
Great. And also, as you'll see, once we start to support this, the previous slide with normalization comes in as well. In that, we need to, if you get input two candidates that are essentially the same but only differ in the number of zeros or white space, do they appear as two local candidates or one? But we'll come back to that on the remote, I guess. But do we have any thoughts on how Chrome appears to implement this, because it's not really specified?
And I don't know off the top of my head how this is implemented. I would need to look into it.
But would you be okay? That's fair enough. All right. I was going to ask about web compat here, but I think that's a little premature, maybe. All right. But does Chrome have any objections to how it behaves? Well, it sounds like we need more information here, so that's fair.
Yeah.
Is there an action item maybe for Guido to come back with information on how Chrome behaves?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next slide. So this another issue, two issues on get remote candidates. That seems underspecified. Well, for two things. One is that it doesn't mention set remote description. Basically, get remote candidates currently says returns a sequence describing the remote ICE candidates received by this ICE transport via add ICE candidate. But for at least any ICE transport connected to a WebRTC peer connection object, we need to also mention set remote description, because that can also contain the same candidates. So that seems easy. Let me know if anyone objects to that part. But there's also a question about when the list is updated, because there's no internal slot. So the proposal is to do this in the queued success task at the end of the fallible async add ICE candidate or as set remote description method. And also, the second question here is, again, it seems poorly defined and not mentioned rollback ICE restarts, and do older generations of candidates accumulate. So the proposal A here is to specify get remote candidates and get local candidates basically to behave the same as the latter works in Chrome. Ewan?
Proposal B is interesting, but I would like to know whether it's even feasible from a process point of view and also from a web compile point of view. So I don't know whether Chrome knows whether this API is used a lot or not used at all or whatever. And also from process-wise, do we know whether B is feasible?
I think Fippo had some information there that at least one of them wasn't used a lot. Is that right?
Yes, give me a minute. I'm trying to look it up. Okay, so get remote candidates is barely used in comparison to get user media. I think it's 1 in 1,000 pages are called get user media calls get remote candidates. but we don't have absolute numbers, and I think they're not possible to measure.
Well, I guess we can do A and B.
But, how can we do like feature at risk? Usually it's when the spec is in CR, and this spec is not in CR, right? So how can we do it?
Oh, good point. Well, I guess we can mark it as it's fit. I guess, can we not mark things in rec feature at risk? We'll have to look into that, I guess.
We could try to deprecate them somehow, but yeah, I don't know.
Also, I think
So
Peter,
maybe A is actually easier than B.
Peter Thatcher, if you're still here, do you have? I'm wondering if you have any input. I think you were the original creator of the ice transport surface here. Wondering if you could speak to the original intent.
Sorry, I was away from my keyboard for a bit. I just got back. Let me.
Okay. So I think we're calling into question the ice transport object has these get local candidates and get remote candidates features that don't seem to be. I think Chrome has an implementation of one, but not the other. And I'm wondering if you could speak to the original intent behind them. If we should keep them. We're talking about maybe removing them. I think Philip should chime in.
Yes, I do remember some of that. This came from WEBRTC, so the plan was that you would build your SDP from the ICE transports, get local candidates and get remote candidates. But WEBRTC PC basically inverted that, and I don't think anyone ever used it in WEBRTC PC. But Peter might know more.
I mean, I don't know how often this is used, or how used or what it's used for. But obviously, if you are giving the browser the remote candidates, then you know what they are, except for peer reflexive candidates. So I suppose this is a way to learn the peer reflexive candidates.
Tim, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think all of this is in local description, so we probably better expose it. Otherwise, people will be digging in the SDP to get it out.
This might also be more useful for in conjunction with the ICE controller work. So if you got particular candidate pairs, that might be more useful to know.
There will be likely candidates that don't form pairs and get the remote and get local candidates are the only ways you can see them. For instance, if you're on an IPv4 only network and get IPv6 remote candidates, those will not appear in pairs.
I think it's a good point that these APIs probably are there to aid not having to parse SDP, which we've never fully gotten away from. So there's that. It's just that the remaining issues are all about questions around how to define them. So, so I guess if we do both proposals, well, what does the working group feel about proposal A? I guess I should ask. That would mean defining similar. Yeah.
My personal position is that proposal A makes sense, and proposal B, we are not sure we're able to actually do it. WEBRTC is a recommendation.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So A seems easier to me, and maybe it will be used later on, like all the algorithms that we might use may be used later on as well. So, but it's a matter of having time to do this work. But the most concerned about.
Okay, so in that case, maybe we move on. And that sounds, I don't hear any objections to A here, so maybe we can move on. Almost out of time here, so we'll just touch on the next couple of slides. So the remaining questions then is how to implement get remote candidates. For instance, and this comes to normalizing and avoiding duplicates, because if we're going to start counting these candidates now, we have to be more careful about duplicates coming in. So in for instance, in add ICE candidate, the username fragment is optional, meaning its absence is treated as meaning current generation. But if we just literally copy the string and return that in get remote candidates, which can be called later, it's not really clear which username fragment that came from. So that's understood in the context of add ICE candidate, but not later. So maybe process should be expanded to disambiguate and insert a ufrag in that case, so that when you call get remote candidates later, you know which one it was. But then, if you then string compare based on, if the app tries to string compare, then they might not recognize the candidate. And additionally, remote ICE candidates from SDP arrive with both mid and level specified, while candidates that come from add ICE candidate don't necessarily have those. So if we want consistent results, we probably want the steps in add ICE candidate to determine both mid, level, and username fragment if missing. So we don't have too much time. So if there are any thoughts and concerns about that approach, what do people think? All right. So we could try to do some PRs in that direction. And the last slide then is similar. Basically, if we want to go further to avoid duplicates and get remote candidates, we have a question of, do we just string compare candidate attribute and ufrag to compare candidates? And since this won't work in Chrome's candidates, since the string form is different in SDP, do we only compare specific fields? Or do we want to be more fancy with normalizing IPv6 and IPv4 representations in the address? So, but a PR. Tim?
Yeah, to clarify, are we talking about the test knowing how to normalize them, or are you talking about the API normalizing them automatically and therefore allowing you to do a specific comparison?
Well, we're talking about normalizing what is returned from the browsers. Or
well,
at least having comparison rules. Sorry, there was a separate question where we decided earlier that there should be verbatim, but there's still a question of are browsers allowed to optimize and deduplicate candidates here? Ewan?
Yeah, so you're having remote candidates and you will want to send messages to them. So I'm guessing that the browser is already doing some kind of deduplication, because probably if you're adding 100 times the same ICE candidate, probably you will not send 100 send messages. So we could hopefully we could look at that and trying to dedupe them and trying to describe them. This seems fine if it's not too complex. And given there's already implementation support somehow probably in that area, I would be confident trying to normalize them and define dedup and so on. Or we should piggyback on some specs to do it.
Okay, I think there's a broader question maybe lost here, that do we expect get remote candidates to only include what is in the SDP right now, or also have a history of previously generated candidates that don't seem to be dropped at the moment? So, but I think we're out of time, so I guess we have to continue. But I'm not hearing any strong opinions on that. Okay. We will try to do a PR. Okay, next slide. We're 5 minutes behind. And this is who's covering the scrub bag?
Eric.
Cool.
Yeah, so this is a follow-up to a question we discussed way back at the last TPAC about adding an encoder complexity API, so that in the RTP encoding parameters, you can specify how much CPU you should trade to get higher quality. And the TLDR, there was then rough consensus, but wanted more information about how to actually implement this, how to map the enum values there to actual settings. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this is my suggestion. So I went through a bunch of different encoders that actually have this and see what settings do they have and what do they actually map to in terms of CPU time. So that's why the two first columns there is what I'm proposing to add as a recommendation. So it's a set that's still useful to an application and that for most codecs can be mapped to a concrete speed setting. And then the 4 columns to the right are sort of just a hint of where to start, essentially. So yeah, next slide. So really what I'm asking for here is feedback on the PR and the bug that I uploaded to see if we can, if this makes sense to you or if it needs further revisions on what we're going to do. That is me. Yes, Yuan?
Yeah, quick question on how do you, what's the support for web codec? We discussed at some point, and we might add support for an API where you plug your web codecs encoder and send it through a sender. And I was wondering how, if we had this API, how you would be able to do these kind of things with web codecs.
I mean, so I have
yeah.
I mean, it's a different group, but yeah, I want to have this same knob there in web codecs as well. Ideally, I'd like to have that on a per frame level, but that's sort of a continued discussions in the web codecs group. But I certainly think we should have that knob there as well.
Okay, and have you started discussing it? Is there a GitHub issue?
I'm not sure if there's a GitHub issue for exactly that, but I can definitely create that.
Okay, I think it would be interesting to see what the feedback is there. Yeah.
Right. Jan-Ivar?
Yeah, so I just pulled up the WebRTC, from the publications list. We have the WebRTC Priority Control API that defines the values very low, low, medium, and high. So I think just a general comment. I'm not an encoding expert, but I'm wondering if we can reduce the number of levels to and also the minimum and maximum, if we could just, I'm not that keen about those wordings. I'm wondering if we could just do something like that, low, medium, and high, or maybe very low, very high, just to reduce the fidelity there.
Yeah, I can certainly try to adjust it. Feels like maybe only one below normal makes sense. I don't think most codecs are exposed extremely low. So but
low,
I'd still
medium, high,
be interested in keeping the very high, like.
Right.
Right.
Okay, that's my only comment. Tim?
Yeah, no, just wondering whether this is going to apply to audio opus, for example.
That's a good question. I haven't really considered audio. I think in the text I've added here, I think this was specified for video only, but I can certainly talk to the audio team, see if it makes sense there as well. Yeah, Philip?
Opus does support complexity, so it could be exposed, but whether it's paying off, I doubt it.
All right. There's no further comments. I guess continue the discussion on GitHub.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
This one should.
Right.
Yes. So we have the old action item of RTP header extension encryption support in WebRTC. This is an issue that started in 2020 and in 2023. Cryptex RFC 9335 got published. The problem we have, the implementations are currently at risk because we never had implementations. In late 2025, libsrtp, which all browsers rely on, merged support for Cryptex and backported it to 2.x. So we should be good in terms of implementations of libsrtp now. And I had some implementation feedback. Cryptex basically encrypts more of the RTP header, both the extensions and the contributing sources. So your audio levels are no longer transmitted in plain over the network, or your corruption score for Eric is no longer transmitted in plain. It is basically a solution to the header extension encryption RFC that was a pain to implement. If we look at the API shape, we have a enum RTC RTP header encryption policy, which has require and negotiate like RTCP nuts. We have a field in the RTC configuration, and we have an attribute on the transceiver. Next slide, please. Okay, I have a couple of asks from implementing this. I think we should add a disable value in the enum. The reason is that one adds Cryptex to the SDP to say, I support this. So if we just say negotiate and require, we have no way to let the local application determine it does not support this. We should keep the default at negotiate, but the rollout will be easier if we add a disable enum value and then turn the knob on negotiate from 0 to 100%. Any opinions on that?
So why do we need the escape hatch there? Are you fearing that like nodes will keep the Cryptex line in the SDP and then it will be negotiated and there will be a failure? Is it the issue?
We might run into interop issues, and that is something I want to avoid because it's a declarative SDP attribute. So if I put Cryptex into my SDP, I'm telling you it's okay to send me Cryptex. But if you don't understand the attribute, we have a problem. Or if your SDP parser does not understand it.
How is it different from other attributes that we are adding progressively?
We haven't added many attributes to the SDP, and we have seen quite some issues, for example, with RTCP feedback and broken SDP parsers in the last year.
Sorry, clarification question. When you say in the enum, is that an API enum or SDP?
That is the API enum.
Which
Basically,
is called?
if you go to the previous slide, Guido, it's the RTC RTP header encryption policy.
Ah, okay, there it is. Thank you.
Tim?
So the failure you're worried about is where a middle box is expecting to be able to use the, say, the audio levels, and then it gets encrypted audio levels and it doesn't, somehow hasn't negotiated down to unencrypted audio levels? Is that the problem that you're thinking of?
No, cryptex is not negotiated. So if I add it to the SDP, you can send it to me, but I can only send it to you if you also add it to the SDP.
So how does this fail then?
It might fail. I mean, I'm mostly worried about broken implementations.
So if I announce support and you announce support, but you in fact have a broken implementation that will corrupt it and that will corrupt instead of encrypt, then I can communicate with you if I'm able to turn it off, but I'm not able to communicate with you if you believe that I'm able to encrypt but decrypt it, but I can't.
Yeah, that's what I want to avoid. Joanne?
So usually we learn from this by trying to ship in data, and then we're seeing breakage, and then we're adding some safeguards. So is it reasonable to only add the disable option if we're seeing breakage while trying to deploy it, or do you think it will be too complex?
I think the risk is that we're enabling cryptex negotiation by default, which is a much harder rollout than letting applications opt in.
But we would still keep negotiate as the default, right? So
yes, but negotiate will actually negotiate. So it will not, the browser API doesn't have a knob to turn it off.
So let's see if I understand right. The kind of case we're thinking of is something where like maybe media soup, where the SDP isn't actually exchanged. It's kind of made up on the fly and copied from, like the answer is copied from the offer and munged on the fly. And so it might include that attribute just by copying it rather than actually understanding it. Is that the kind of problem we're thinking about?
Yes. Even though in media soup it can't happen.
Right, but
stupid SDP parsers, yes.
But at the same time, it's no.
All right, how do we progress?
I can prepare a PR to add it to the enum, and then we can discuss in that PR.
Yeah, I'm still a bit puzzled because if you set it to disable, it means that you're already trying to change something. So if you're changing something, you could change also, for instance, your SDP parser. So it means that the SDP parser is somewhere else that you do not have control on. So
yeah, I'm not worried about browsers. Browsers should handle the interop transparently. It is servers that are having not great SDP parsers. Tim?
Yeah, no, I think it's a lot easier to get a web dev to set a flag in the front end than it is to get somebody to re-engineer and retest an SDP parser. So as a workaround, this is a good kind of fallback for people. But I'm still struggling to think of cases where it will actually happen, but I'm not exposed to all of them. So
well, if you're changing from front end to disable it, you can change the front end to remove the line that you do not want in the SDP as well, and then send it. So it's not that different.
Yes, but that's SDP manipulation, which web developers are very much afraid of.
And they want them to be afraid of it.
True. We don't want to encourage that either. Guido, can you move back to the next slide, please? Okay, so I'll prepare a PR for that, and then we resolve that issue in the PR. If that's okay. Okay, next question.
Yeah, that works. Good.
Okay, the next question is, we have specified a attribute on the transceiver which tells you whether it was negotiated. I don't see a use case for it because either you are opportunistically negotiating it with negotiate, or you are enforcing it with the require option. Also, cryptex is per transport and not per transceiver, so it sits on the wrong object, but we don't have similar attributes on the transport today. So the ask is, can we remove it from the transceiver? Niva?
So you're saying it belongs on the transport?
Yes.
Well, it's
since we have transport objects, that makes sense.
It's per bundle. Is it per bundle group or across bundle group? If it's not, if we're not fully bundled, or are you requiring fully bundled for this?
In the SDP, it can be a session attribute or one that's consistent across the bundle. So I would say it lives on the transport in WEBRTC.
Right, and whether it's bundled or not, in the case of bundled, that'll be one transport object, right?
Mm-hmm.
The same, yeah. And that works for me.
I mean, I would prefer removing it because I don't see the value. I wouldn't move it to the transport.
Oh, I see. So what's the, yeah, that works.
Okay. And last ask I had for this is, can you change your mind in set configuration between the values? This was originally a problem in libsrdp, but it is possible to turn off and turn on cryptex on the fly. But I don't see the use case for giving JavaScript that level of control over encryption. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can always start by throwing if you're trying to change it. And if there's somebody that wants it in the future, they can explain the use case and we can discuss it.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Okay, I have resolutions for these. Next slide, please, Guido. Okay, other than that, we need to align the definition of require with the RFC, because the RFC actually rejects packets if you require and they don't use cryptex. That's a technical change, and we have two editorial issues around that. The support cryptex definition is not aligned with the RFC, and the whole contributing sources encryption should be mentioned. It currently isn't. Tim?
Does that cover packets that don't have any header extensions? Like if you say supports cryptex, requires cryptex, but you're actually not having any header extensions, what happens?
Good question. Whatever libsrdp does, I will check. I would expect it to pass it through.
I think that's the outcome I want, but like.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'll check with libsrdp. Okay, and last but not least, we have a naming issue raised by the Mozilla folks. We have taken the names from the RTCP MAX policy, negotiate and require. negotiate doesn't really fit the declarative nature of the attribute in the FTP. And if we diverge from the naming, we can probably rename it to disable anyway. Should we discuss that in the PR? Because I expect that to be bike sharing. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, then I'm done. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Okay, we have one. Next is me. I was going to talk about diagnostic logging, but we have only 9 minutes left, and I think I'll need 15 minutes, so I'm happy to. And we have yet another item after this one, so I can leave this one for the meeting in July. And if your item, Yuan, can be done in 9 minutes, maybe it's better to discuss that one.
Yeah, I think it can be done in 5 minutes, hopefully.
Good.
Okay.
Go for it.
So the issue is HDR in WebRTC. So VP9 HDR works in Chrome. It used to not work in Safari. It should work in WebKit Truck right now. And reason was that websites, well, we learned that it was broken because some websites do use it, and they use VP9 properly too with the color space RTP header extension. So which is good, but is not standard RTP header extension. Next slide. So first thing is, do we need to standardize it? Would it be good to standardize it at the IETF level? I guess it's useful for VP9. Maybe it's not as useful for HVC and AV1 because probably you can, at least for HDR, provide the color space information just in the bitstream. But maybe it's good to be able to override what's in the bitstream in the header extension. That is sort of what is available in WebCodecs. In WebCodecs, you can override the color space in the config. So it would mirror things. So I would tend to think we should standardize this RTP header extension. So that's a question to working group. Also, WebRTC spec is not mentioning HDR or call handling at all. So I'm not sure what are the reasonable expectations. So expectations can be handled at least by WPT testing. But I don't think there's coverage for HDR over WebRTC with a mixture of media stream track processor, video track generator, I420p10 video frames, and HDR color space. We could write something and see what's happening, but it would come down to what we do expect from the WebRTC. Are we expecting that the color space will be preserved and that 10 bits will be preserved and so on? That's something maybe the spec should say something about. I'm not quite sure. And yeah, I'm interested in your feedback on whether we should add tests. I think we should. Next slide. Finally, since we have, yeah, Oliver.
You said it was in WebKit. Does that mean it's shipping in Safari?
Well, it shipped. It landed 2 days ago, I think.
Okay.
So
all right.
probably not, but yeah, it will. It will land at some point, I guess.
The intent is to ship, so then Chrome and Safari will both support this. So I think in that case, we would want to standardize so we can implement it too.
Yeah, we added it because custom, like, people are using it. Yeah. So apart from that, it seems I wonder whether we have other things to do with HDR. For instance, get user media. There are some HDR cameras. So how do you get HDR content? I believe you should opt in. Maybe it should not be by default, but we do not have API. Get this media, it's the same. So so question is, should web pages be allowed to enable HDR capture? And what about controlling pixel format either? Also encoded transform API, should it expose color space info? I don't know. I know that at some point the encoded transform API was used in some websites on the receive side only. So it would mean that getting color space info could be useful, or maybe it should be left to an API that is specific to that, to the receiving side, and not and we should not try to expose that in encoded transform API. Maybe there are other shortcomings, but so thoughts on all these points? Yep, Fipo.
I think it might be useful to expose it in request video frame callback as well, if you do it in encoded transform on the receive side.
So in request video frame callback, you get a callback, you create a video frame from it, and then you can get the color space from the video frame. So you would expect something different, something more than that, or?
No, that should be fine.
Okay.
If it's exposed there, should be good.
It's not exposed by default. You would need to create a video frame from it. So it's, yeah, not direct. But. Yep, Janiva.
So if I search for web codecs and HDR, there does seems to be some pieces that represent HDR frames, like video frame, color space transfer, video color space, primaries, video pixel format. So I would encourage our working group to look at web codecs, since they seem to have defined a lot of things here that perhaps we can reuse.
I mean, if we're defining things in WebRTC PC, or I think we should refer to web codecs like color space. We should reuse the definitions and so on. But still, video track generator, you're passing some frames and you're encoding them, and you're creating an RTP header extension from it. How do you do that, for instance? It would be good to identify how you're doing it. And probably it's basically you have a video frame object, which is web codecs. You have a color space, which is coming from it, which is defined in terms of web codecs. And then you're populating the RTP header extension from it, basically. Something like that.
Right. Yeah, we still have the unfortunate anomaly that our encoded video frames are not exactly the same as web codecs, but yeah.
Oh, in encoded transform. Yeah, in encoded transform, I don't know whether we need to expose it. I'm certain that you need, well, I don't know. Probably the header extension is populated after encoded transform on the send side. So probably it's somewhere there, but not exposed to the encoded frame. That's my guess.
Okay, a question on, since I'm here, on get user media. Why would the web page need to enable HDR in that case? I mean, media stream track is sort of opaque. It used to be opaque, right? So unless you're doing encoded transform and things like that. Is that the issue?
No, the issue is that you get a camera. It can generate HDR content, or it can generate regular SDR content. So it's up to you. And I think at least in Safari, it's probably not enabling HDR content. So you will get 8 bits video frames and not 10 bits video frames. And probably it's good enough for most applications. I would guess that it's usually you try to leave applications opt-in to HDR and not provide them HDR by default. So that's why I would tend to think that we should do the same for get user media or get display media.
All right, thanks.
Yep, people.
Is there an interaction with codecs that cannot encode that?
I have to go. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I mean, if you're VPN9 profile 1, I guess you will get a 10 bits video frame, and you will convert it to an 8-bit video frame and send it. That's probably what will happen. You will downgrade, which is sort of okay. But if you're all you're doing is getting a 10-bit video frame and sending it for peer connection, it would be better to stick with an 8-bit video frame in the first place because it's more efficient.
Yes. I mean, I'm worried about the case where only VP8 gets negotiated. Then it would be a waste of resources.
Yeah.
But as long as the behavior is defined, it should be okay.
Yeah, I mean, even with VP9, if I think that if you're negotiating VP9 profile 1, it will be the one that will be used anyway.
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, no, I think our experience of HDR is that it quite often puts the sensor in a different mode. So even if you get a different, even if you get, even without the 10-bit, 8 to 10-bit conversion, you'll still get different video out of it because the sensor's in a different algorithm, using a different algorithm, different optimization.
Yeah. So you prefer opt-in as well?
Yeah, I think it would be good to be able to set it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same. I don't think that people asked for it already, so maybe there's no important usage. But since there are applications that are sending HDR content, like it's basically some screen share applications are doing it, and they're using a native application on the send side, but the receive side is a browser. So it feels like we should be able to do the send side as well in a browser, which would require get user media and get display media to support HDR.
So I think we are at time, but I'm hearing basically broad support that we want HDR. I'm not hearing anyone saying we should not do HDR. So maybe we can end with that and work it out on GitHub. All right, sounds good, everyone. Thanks so much. See you in a month. Bye.